Dyer Mendoza of Mission recalls how his little brother, 18-year-old Joaquin Luna, hoped to become an engineer. The undocumented immigrant was a senior at Juarez Lincoln High School.
It's like all these kids that are here, they're all dependent in that DREAM Act to keep on studying.
Family is now planning Joaquin's funeral. They say the teen committed suicide Friday, leaving letters behind, revealing he was worried about his immigration status. Family says Joaquin was frustrated the DREAM Act never passed, an initiative to give permanent residency in the U.S. to a select group of illegal immigrants.
He didn't saw no other way or no other option.
Family says Friday around 9 p.m., the 18-year-old dressed up in a tie and suit, kissed them goodbye, then went into the restroom and shot himself in the head with a small handgun.
And as soon as I pulled him out to the kitchen, I could see the bullet hole, and there was no movement, no signs of anything, and he was gone.
Luna wanted to succeed in life, to provide a better life for his mother, Santa Lerma Mendoza. Family says in his suicide letters, he wrote that he feared being an illegal immigrant would keep him from fulfilling his goals.
He was saying that he was going to do this because he wasn't going to be able to continue with his college.
Now this mother is only left with grief.
Y no se quiten la vida, muchachitos. Querer es poder. Tengan fe en Dios. Y Dios, hay que pedirle de todo corazón.
In Mission, Daisy Martinez, Action 4 News.
Hello everyone, good morning. My name is Imelda Plasencia, and I'm one of the coordinators for the Circle Project.
Okay, hi, I'm Betsy Estudillo, and I'm also one of the coordinators for the Circle Project.
Got it. So, any initial reactions from the movie that we just saw, from the little video clip? Sorry? Painful to watch? Okay. Yes? It's devastating. So painful to watch and devastating. Emotional health and stress, anxiety, all of those very lived realities exist in our communities. And as we go through our PowerPoint, you will be able to address some of those. But we just wanted to share a little bit about the development of the Circle Project. So the Circle Project developed based out of the need of our community to be able to address the stress, depression, anxiety that we live on a daily basis. We're going to be going into a little bit of what those stressors are for our communities, learn ways to support the emotional well-being of undocumented youth, and also learn about critical race theory and how that's important to supporting the emotional health of undocumented youth, and also for undocumented youth to cope with accepting their reality as being undocumented. Now, just to backtrack a little bit, I've been organizing since 18 for the immigrant youth movement. I'm 27 now, and there has always been a reoccurring depression within our community. It kind of comes and goes, and it's constant. And so there really hasn't been, I think where we are now in the immigrant youth movement is a good, we're at a place where we can kind of be able to reflect on our experiences as we've moved on for so many years of campaigning and organizing. And it's been a very difficult journey, but I feel very fortunate to be a part of the DREAM Resource Center and be able to offer accessibility to resources to address some of these issues.
And, oh, wow. And so I also been organizing since I was about 17, and I started with Charla Wise Up, and so have been for a very long time, and I'm 27 now, so it's been 10 years for me. And throughout my, organizing and going to school, I realized that there was a lot of stress within me, a lot of anxiety when it came to paying for school, when it came to learning about my identity and how that was going to impact my life. So knowing this need, I understood that others were going through the same thing and I wasn't alone. And so it was important for me to address this and to create a project like the Circle Project. I wanted to talk about critical race theory for a little bit, and first of all, I do want to say that I'm making no justice to critical race theory in the next 5 minutes, because it really does take a lot more time to really explain it. And for those that know about critical race studies, it was formed from critical legal studies back in the 1970s. And really the theory, what it does is that it critically analyzes how race, class, gender intersects and impacts one individual and community, right? And how all of these really oppresses communities of color and ethnic communities. So the reason that we use critical legal studies, critical race studies, CRT, is that it is very important when we work with immigrant communities. And the reason why, some of its tenets is that racism and white privilege are endemic in the US and beyond, which means that I'm not talking just about the individual racist person or like the white supremacist. I'm talking about racist policies like Arizona, SB 1070, right? Policies that impact and keep oppressing people of color, ethnic communities, and immigrant communities. And so it's important to acknowledge that we are not a colorblind society, right? No matter how much we say it, or how much we say we're post-racial America after Obama got elected, we're not. There's still very real racism going on, but there's still very clear racism, but I think it's sort of like changed within policies and the way that we interact with people. So it also, CRT really challenges the dominant ideology. I mean, how many times have we seen media clips or newspaper clips that portray undocumented immigrants as if they came to the country to take over social services and just came here to have babies, right? How many of us have seen those images, right? And they're very negative. And so what happens is that when you see those images, you sort of make assumptions about a community. You think that all undocumented immigrants are from Mexico. You think that they all came here, they're all crossing the border pregnant, and they're just like, the first place they're going to go to is that welfare building, right? And so the CRT really wants to bring those counter stories, those stories from people like us who can tell you like, no, my parents crossed the border and it took them a month because they had, because they were being persecuted back home, because they could no longer feed us. Those are the stories that we want to bring out. And so the Circle Project really wants to acknowledge those stories because they're also a way to heal. Stories are very, very powerful, and so narratives can be used to heal a person and heal a community. And so CRT also recognizes that there is intersecting identity. So, for example, I'm a woman, but I was undocumented, so that was my identity. And so we also have undocumented people who are queer, who are Asian, API, and who are undocumented. And so all those identities intersect with one another, and we don't identify with just one, we identify with all. And that's very important to address when we're talking about people's experiences. For example, a white gay male's experience will be completely different than a gay person of color's experience, right? Because now you're intersecting race. And so, yes, they're both gay, but they're both different race, and so that the experiences that they have may be very, very different. Lastly, there is a huge commitment to social justice. And I think I can say that that's why we're all here, right? There's a commitment to social justice and ending the oppression of people of color and ethnic communities, and specifically today, really ending the oppression of undocumented immigrants. So sort of that was in a nutshell what CRT is. And the reason that I'm bringing this up now is that we will talk about it when we're going through the presentation today. And we're very, it's very on purpose because that's how the Circle Project really wants to work on this under a CRT lens. So our collective challenge, like we were saying a lot, like growing up, I knew that I was like anxious all the time. I was very stressed, especially during like when I started school. And so it's understanding that it wasn't just me, that there's a lot of undocumented youth who are going through the same thing. Undocumented youth face higher levels of stress and depression than their native peers. Last year, I was part of a class. I'm part of the MSW, about to graduate to be a social worker. And I was in UCLA. We were taking a class during research, and we found out through focus groups and all this information that actually undocumented youth have higher levels of stress and depression than their native peers. And the reason why is that undocumented youth have very unique experiences. They have to, they're not, like, for example, when we have a college student, undocumented youth work 2 or 3 jobs and are active in school and still take a full load of classes. And that's very unique, right? But that's the way that we're able to survive and keep going. And so undocumented youth have very unique experiences that are not the same as everyone. So we need to find ways, very unique ways to face these challenges and help them and support them in order to reduce the stress and depression, anxiety. And I know you guys have heard this probably this whole morning, but just to kind of recap and why this is so important in the statistical profile is that 2.1 million undocumented youth, there's 2.1 million undocumented youth nationally. 26% are in California, which means that's huge, right? So California has a huge population of undocumented immigrants and very huge population of undocumented youth. And then the second one is Texas, and then after that I think it's Florida, but California has the huge population. So out of that, 65,000 undocumented youth graduate from U.S. high schools every year. Only 5 to 10 pursue higher education, and that's kind of low, right? And we understand there's a lot of obstacles already trying to go to higher education. The cost, also when you're undocumented, it adds more barriers when you don't have, when you have to take care of your family, when you have to work 2 or 3 jobs. And I'm really happy that the California Dream Act passed, because that alleviates some of that stress. And then now we have deferred action. But for so long, like myself, there was no California Dream Act. I really had to find creative ways to find funding, and that added to my stress, because I remember trying to get a scholarship that got stuck in the institution because it became state money. And that's very common of what used to happen. It continues to happen now, but the California sort of alleviates that process. 40% of immigrant communities live below poverty line. And this is very important to know, because when you are a low-income family, the last thing you think about is taking care of your physical and mental well-being, right? So the first thing you want to do when you're low income is, do I have shelter and do I have a home, right? And the next thing is just like, well, we'll just take care of it later. And so we only go to the doctor. Like, for example, I remember that I was filling out an application, and it was talking about your primary care doctor. And I was like, I don't know, like the clinic, the local clinic. And that's the reality. A lot of us go to like the local clinic or the hospital because we only go in case of an emergency. We never go just to have a checkup. And also, can you imagine our mental health? Like the first time I heard about a therapist was at UCLA, when there was these two very young white males who were talking about their therapist like they were just talking about a friend. And I was like, what is going on? Like, why are they talking about their therapist? Are they crazy? And so we're not used to that. We're not used to going to a therapist or a counselor talking about our problems, because there's a huge stigma with immigrant communities that you're crazy, and on top of that, if there wasn't, like, you can't afford one, really. Like, the last thing you're thinking about is taking care of your mental health. So this is important to know, because all of this adds, you can kind of get a picture of how many undocumented youth are and how all of this information really impacts their daily life. And so why are they still undocumented? So we're very happy to have the California Dream Act, AB 13131, and defer action that alleviates some of that stress and that pain that we have. So, but the reality is that it's not a path to legalization, right? Even the California Dream Act is a little bit like, oh, there's some funding, but not with some restrictions. And so it's important to know that undocumented youth are still continue to be undocumented. And the reason is that I don't know what it is. I think people think there's an imaginary line somewhere, right? And I'm like, where is this line? Because really I never saw it growing up. And I'm sure if there was, like, I would have been there, like, first in line. So there is really no line, and immigrants have very different ways of coming here. So some of them come through visas, some of them come through crossing the border, right? And some of them go back and then come back, and so everyone has a different experiences. For example, my mom and my dad came here in 1989. They applied for 245I with an employer, and we were all like, for 10 years we were in this program. I turned 21, and they still hadn't approved my dad, so I aged out of the process, which means I was taken out and I had to sort of reapply and start from the beginning. My parents and my sister got their legal residency 6 months after I turned 21. So that was very horrible for me, because I was like, wow, like 6 months, really? Because I just turned 21? And so that's the reality, is that we have these like policies that are just make the cutoff for youth and then affect them, right? And so generally, like I said, because everyone comes here different ways, everyone has a different way of migrating, there's different pathways to establishing residency. Even like, for example, like I said, my parents had to wait 10 years. And there's like a sort of a category. Like if you get petitioned by an aunt, if you get petitioned by your dad, there's certain years you wait, right? And then so the fastest is like if you marry somebody. But then now if you marry somebody, you have to leave the country, and that also complicates it, right? Or if you can stay here, but then you have to have had a process already prior to that. So it's really complicated. What I'm trying to say, immigration policy is very complex, and it's not very easy. So like I said, the process can take up to 10 years depending on the country and origin. And all of this waiting really adds to the stress. I can tell you that when I was 21 and I aged out, like I wasn't happy. Every 21-year-old is happy because they get like, oh, I get to go to the club and the bar and like, woo. And I was like, no, this is sad. Like I don't want to be 21, although a lot of youth really wanted to be 21 to go and really experience life, right? So.
Okay, so I just wanted to further reiterate, we took out our policies, which you'll be able to learn about later on in the agenda, but I just wanted to further emphasize how the lives of undocumented youth are so intertwined with policy and legislation. How we refer to ourselves, right, undocumented, that in itself is a policy essentially, and how we identify, and how that can be that in itself is a stressor. So we wanted to take you now on a little journey to listen and just envision yourself as an undocumented youth. Okay. So if everyone can please close your eyes. Get comfortable with both feet on the floor as you ground yourself. Breathe deeply through your nose. Notice how the inhale is cooler than your exhale. Breathe deep 2 more times, making sure that your exhale is longer than your inhale. Now imagine you're a transfer student and are completing your first quarter at the university. Your first quarter was difficult because as a commuter, you were only on campus to attend classes and then had to rush home to rest for the next day. You've had a hard time making friends and have been feeling alone and disconnected. You do not feel safe coming out and wonder if there are other undocumented students like yourself. You have a part-time job where you make less than minimum wage. Your employer is aware of your undocumented status and your working conditions are unbearable. You're constantly being reminded of how you are dispensable, how you are replaceable, how you are undocumented, and you endure homophobic comments from your coworkers. Every day you wake up at 5 a.m. to go to work and attend class in the afternoons and evening. A whole day's work leaves you physically and emotionally drained. You reached a point where you hate waking up. It's difficult to concentrate during class, and your grades have been declining. How to pay for college, how to pay for your bills, how to keep your home, all of it is very overwhelming. At times you think to yourself, is this even worth it? I feel lost and alone. Should I leave school? Your motivation to keep going is slowly diminishing. You have strong feelings of hopelessness. This next quarter, you have to declare non-attendance because your job does not pay you enough money to support yourself in school. You're uncertain of when you'll be able to return to the university, and even if you will ever graduate. Feeling sad, you decide to visit your school's counseling center. Your friend recommended them after you mentioned feeling depressed and unable to wake up in the morning. This is your first visit to the counseling center. You feel embarrassed and uncomfortable and unsure whether they will help you. Your therapist is a tall, blonde, green-eyed woman. You wonder if she will understand you. You wonder if she knows about being undocumented. During your first session, you feel scared. You've never come out as being undocumented. You've never even told your closest friends. Is this a safe space for me? I need to tell her so she can help me. Your therapist asks, why don't you just apply for financial aid? There are a lot of services that help students on campus. Have you thought about that? Many thoughts start racing through your head. What if she outs me? Can I trust her? I don't think she understands my experience. You start losing your breath and your palms begin to sweat. You remain silent. You may open your eyes now. So this story is a compilation of very, common stories that we hear within our undocumented youth. Maybe some that you've heard in your own personal sessions as a counselor, as an educator. Any initial reactions from the day in the life? Yes?
I work with you, and I refer my legal therapy almost every week. I'm having a tough time reaching my documents. We have services, but just getting them to open up, and admit I can get documents once I do that. It's hard for me to get documents.
Thank you. So she stated that she works with undocumented youth, is referring them to therapy, but them being able to reach out for the service or come out is very difficult. And that in itself is understandable. There is a lot of fear and shame that still exists. And we'll talk about some of the things that we can do within our own organizations to be able to create safe zones and work with our undocumented youth to feel comfortable.
Just to point out, there is some difficulty getting undocumented youth to come and talk to a therapist or even a counselor. And the reason why, if we look at it, and let's be honest, we're all here, we're authority figures, right? In the eyes of a youth and a student, we're authority figures. And so we haven't had the best experiences with authority figures. They've either said something very hateful and very discriminatory. They deported our parents, right? And so authority figures really, for undocumented youth, are not, there's no trust. And so there definitely needs to build that trust first before you can even say, you need to go to therapy. And I'm telling you, as someone who was telling me, you need to go to therapy, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's not gonna happen because I've never been there. And like, why are you telling me I need to go when all I know is that people who go to therapy are just crazy, right? So there's a way, and we'll say how and what you could do and not do.
And things that we can do collectively and how we can support all of you as well. So now we're gonna learn a little bit of some of the stressors of undocumented youth.
So undocumented youth, the way I'm processing, undocumented youth find out they're undocumented in several ways. So you have the youth who came here at a very, very early age, 2 months, 3-year-olds, 2-year-olds, who don't realize they're undocumented until maybe high school, right? And then you have youth who know all their lives, they came here at 13, 14, they're very aware and conscious of their status, but they don't really understand what it means until you graduate high school. So is there high school counselors in here? Any high school? Okay, this is very important because this is the stage when undocumented youth need the most support. when they're in high school, either they know they're undocumented or they don't know, they're going to really find out what it means. I found out, I knew that I was undocumented when I was 12 or 13. Before that, I thought I was born here. Because I came here when I was 3. So when I was 12, 13, I found out I was undocumented, so I was like, okay, that's fine. But when I was 17, I went to a FAFSA workshop. And I filled it out, and I was all ready, and then they told me, oh, well, where's the Social Security part? And I was like, oh, well, that's easy. Well, let me go ask my parents. And then they told me I didn't have one. I was like, oh, like, this is what it really means, And then the next one was like, everyone's getting a driver's license. I went, well, I can go too, right? And then I was like, oh, okay, so that's another thing I can do. And so as we grow up and we apply to college and we have all these other things that are sort of like rites of passages for youth at that time, you see the barriers that come with that. And then when you get older, the more obstacles, especially during college, you have more obstacles. But I really think that time is when you really find out what it means to be undocumented. And then the feelings that happen throughout the time and throughout really is feeling like an outsider, feeling like a second-class citizen, right? So why are all my peers able to get a driver's license and I'm not? Or why are my peers going to that senior trip but I can't? Or why is it that my friend got that scholarship but I can't? And so that's really hard to understand when from K through 12 you've done everything just as everyone has done. You go to you watch Power Rangers, and anyone want, okay, I grew up with Power Rangers, right? And like that was like every Tamagotchi, whatever, like I did that. And so it was hard for me to be like at senior years to be like, oh, like I can't do that. And so it really makes you feel like a second-class person. It negatively impacts your self-esteem, right? So if you work hard your K through 12 and you can go to that college but you can't, that really puts you down and says, well, I worked really hard, but now I can't go to Berkeley or I can't go to UCLA. So that really impacts your self-esteem. And then, so we have blame, stigma, and discrimination. A lot of undocumented youth have a lot of social stigma. They're blamed for social and economic worries in the U.S. Especially I think this is very pertinent to like now, right, when we have an economic recession. And so the images we get are just like heightened. Like all of a sudden, like, the economy goes down and just like the images of really negative images of undocumented immigrant goes up. And we don't have to go far. We can see it in social media. We can see it in like articles where like, I hate seeing the comments and articles at the bottom, but sometimes I can't help it, right? And I'm just like, because this is how people think. Like the things that they say are really hurtful, like illegal, criminal, those words, alien, like those are very hurtful language. And so we need to be conscious of that, how we talk to students, right? What are some ways that we can say like undocumented instead of illegal? And so we're also, like I said, wrongfully portrayed as exploiting public assistance programs. Like I was talking about, people think that immigrants come here for the social services. In fact, research says that undocumented immigrants are less likely to use social services because they think that they will get deported. They don't have, most undocumented immigrants don't have a primary care doctor, right? They just go, like I said, they go to the clinic or they go to the emergency when there's an emergency, but they don't really take the social service. I've met people where they don't even have, their kids can qualify for CalFresh, which is like food stamps, but they don't even take their kids because that's how much they're scared, right? So they feel very unwelcome, like I said, knowing that there's very negative stereotypes going around. A lot of this can result in shame, guilt, fear, insecurity, need to make your identity secret. So this is why we've encountered a lot of youth who like don't want to come out to you, right? And which we actually encourage you guys not to make them come out. They should come out when they're ready, right? Because not everyone, even though I know like we've come so long and I can tell you that people are in the stage of undocumented and unafraid, that doesn't mean that every undocumented youth is undocumented and unafraid. There's still a lot of real fear going on, and there's a lot of shame, so that's why they probably won't come out to you and tell you what's going on.
We also live in a time of very vocal anti-immigrant sentiment. So just imagining hearing all of these things and then coming to a point where you say to yourself, this is me, right? So it's a matter of our youth internalizing everything that is heard, everything that is said about undocumented communities, how they are being referred to, and saying to themselves, this is me. And that's what's very common with our youth, as opposed to recognizing as an external factor that are imposed, and these are the conditions that you live in. Immigrant youth are internalizing this and taking it in as a part of their identity. So that impacting their self-worth and shame. Just earlier this week, we met with some St. John's clinicians to speak about the issue, and they were sharing a story of a student who has border personality disorder because of how huge the shame is within themselves internally, and how that has manifested. And so, trauma and migration experience. A common narrative that we hear about undocumented youth is that they were raised in the United States, right? But we do have youth who came at a later age, usually in their 13s, 14s, 15s. And the unique experience about that is that they're able to recall their lived experience with migration. So a lot of them crossing the border, having that migration experience, living it with their parents is very much still, is very real and present. I had a story of a student who now can no longer eat tuna because that's the only thing that he ate and carried when he crossed the border with his mother. Tuna, water, and a can opener, and now he can't stand it, right? So after encountering food and water deprivation, various forms of physical threats, rape, and murder. And this being something that's very common, we have thousands of lives that have been lost at the borders, and if you can imagine what this is for our families, people waiting for their family members, saying, okay, I'll be there in a week, and then 8 days, 9 days passes, 2 weeks, an entire month, and they've never heard from their family members again. Those are very real. And so some of our students know that their uncles, their aunts are coming, but still have to go to school the next day, right? And also just multiple borders that some people have to cross as well. It's just not the Mexico and US border. A lot of people come overseas from various countries, in addition to borders along Southern America. And so in terms of current political context, ever since 1984 with Operation Gatekeeper, what they have done is that they have organized border patrol in highly populated areas. And what this has done is it has pushed travelers into far more dangerous conditions, into extreme environments and natural barriers, increasing the death and mortality. And just an example of how policies have impacted the deaths of our border, and people still choosing to come because of the extreme and harsh realities that they are escaping. So this is actually a sign at the border. It says, cuidado, no exponga su vida a los elementos, no vale la pena. It's be safe, don't expose yourself to the elements, it's not worth it, right? And also acculturation. Once our students have come into the United States, it's learning how to be able to adapt to your new society is very key to your mental health and being able to adjust in the new country. So the language barriers, being able to have access to social networks and societal norms, all of those things that impact really your success in a country. Being able to come over and go to school is definitely an asset. We have a lot of youth who come maybe 16, 17, 18 and go straight into the workforce as opposed to going into our high schools and reaching that avenue, and that really having a different life trajectory for our students and their opportunities.
And so we also have fear of contact and deportation. There is a very real contact of fear with, like I said, authority figures. And with every reason. I mean, more people have been deported under Obama administration than other administration, right? And so when people are scared of police officers, of any type of authority figure, it's with every reason. I mean, any contact, like if you're living in Arizona, can potentially put you at risk for deportation. So fear really is integrated in your daily life, and it's so much. I was actually telling Imelda the other day, I was like, well, I just recently, a week ago, I just got my legal residency, and I've been driving for 8 years, and I'm very hyper vigilant of cops. I can spot them like quickly. I just learned that. I think it's a skill now, where I'm like, okay, there's a cop right there. And we were talking about this, we're like, oh, like we can spot cops. And so there was a cop behind me. I just saw him from my mirror, and I was like super like tense, and I was like sweating. My hands were palpitating, and then I had to remind myself, like, you have a driver's license, like, calm down. But that fear doesn't go away. Like, it's still there, and I'm like, I don't care. Like, I'm still scared. I don't know what's going on. But it that shows you that, like, the fear is still within our communities. Even if you have a driver's license, it doesn't go away just because someone gave you a piece of paper. And so whenever there's, when youth encounter like certain things, like it just kind of triggers that. I know, Imelda, you...
Yeah, so I always share that I've developed an anxiety for orange cones. So orange cones, I live in La Puente. Anybody? No? Okay. So there's a lot of checkpoints in La Puente, El Monte, Pomona, in my neighborhood. And so a checkpoint either means construction, a yellow cone either means construction or a checkpoint. So even being able to see them, sometimes driving on the freeway, just noticing them kind of gets me scared because of the anxiety that I've developed through going to a checkpoint, which I've had my car taken away.
And I think that just
real.
That, you know, people can say, well, you know, a lot of people are scared of cops. A lot of people are afraid of cones. And I'm like, you don't understand at the level it is. Like, I was going with my husband the other day, we're driving, and I was like, you know, I'm like, every time I see a cop, I just get really nervous. And then I'm like, I don't feel safe. And he's like, that's weird. He's like, I always feel safe around cops. And I'm like, well, your experience was completely different because you grew up in middle-class suburban area, and you weren't pulled over for any little thing, right? I've been pulled over at least 3 times for no reason. And so our experiences are completely different, where I'm like, I don't like cops, and I don't like seeing, because to me it's like, that's the people that get my family deported. Those are the people that have towed away my dad's car, right? So that's always in me. And there's also, like, just to continue, you know, like what I was saying, there's fear of being deported increases when sentencing reports help. So if you are scared of being deported, you're not going to go and seek help. You're not going to go see your doctor. You're not going to go see social services. You may not even go to your counselor or educator. Because if you feel like, if you out yourself and you tell someone you're undocumented, that's it. Everyone knows your secret. And and someone can use that against you. I had a friend of mine who actually was in a really bad relationship, where at the end it got so ugly that her former boyfriend actually told her if they were to break up, he was going to call ICE on her. And so these are like people that are supposed to love you and be your partner. And so that's what happened to her. And this happens very often when you have women who are in relationships, who are victims of DV, domestic violence, and are in the relationship because there is that, you know, I'm going to call ICE on you. And so we need to acknowledge those experiences as well. There's also, like I said, 1 million people have been deported under Obama's administration. You have policies such as secure communities and 287G, which basically 278G really puts makes it easier, has a relationship between ICE officials and local and state policemen to have the authority to act as immigration officers. So this is why you have in Arizona the ability that like cops are able to pull somebody and then ask them for the papers. It's because of 287G programs, and they're actually not a requirement, they're voluntary. So you know that if a county or a state takes 287G, like they're really actively seeking to deport immigrants.